Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Fine. I'm actually dressed decently because I'm going to do a real TV show later, Bob.
Real as opposed to what?
As opposed to Blogging Heads. It's going to be broadcast over the nation's airwaves.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
I hear
you.
they're very discriminating at MSNBC.
Thank you, yes.
How'd you get there? You must know somebody. It can't be on the basis of merit. Who invited you?
Matt Miller is...
Oh, well, you know Matt Miller from way back. This is cheating, Mickey. This isn't like some booker seeing you on Blogging Heads TV and saying, hey, this guy's got star power. This is like Matt repaying some debt.
Connections, Bob. If you had my Rolodex, you'd go places in this business.
Hey, I actually do. Matt Miller mentioned my book in a column a week ago, mentioned The Moral Animal, and immediately I've got the people from, what show is it, Dylan Ratigan on MSNBC?
That's the show I'm going on.
Is it? Well, you know what I told him, Mickey? You know what I told him?
You're too busy.
I'm too damn busy. Yeah.
Pressing Blogging Heads business.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Whew, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling
that's
good.
the difference between you and me. That's an alpha move, Bob.
Oh, man, I'm feeling good. Let's just call it a day. This dialogue is complete as far as I'm concerned.
If I were a girl, you would have picked me up.
Speaking of that,
Hey.
Mickey. No, actually, I think I would have sent you a tweet that would have linked to a photo on Y-Frog.
You're making an excellent transition to the Anthony Weiner scandal, which may have taken a new form by the time this is out, because
he's going to speak to the press again, he hopes, less disastrously than he spoke to the press yesterday.
Man, that was like a bad scene from The Good Wife yesterday.
I was just, it's funny, you had said, you want to talk about this, and I was like, don't drag me down into your gutters, Mickey. And you said, well, it'll be fun. I can try to convince you that there's something to it. And I'm thinking, good luck. And then I saw his performance, under questioning, and I felt sure at the end that he did it. He's guilty. He's just, why would he not answer a simple question like, did you do it?
Right. Now, when you look up in the dictionary guilty, they show a picture of that videotape now.
Man, that was bad. And it's hard to imagine what he's going to say at his kind of press conference-y thing today.
Well, it's a classic example of bad PR, all these Democratic PR consultants say that the thing to do is to say you're going to move on and, how can you, it's beneath you to talk about this when middle-class incomes are stagnant. That was the most hilarious line that his press person used.
Yeah.
And just tough it out. And that advice is sort of almost always a disaster unless you're running against a vicious Republican in a blue state that's, and it's 2 weeks before the election. Or if you're a popular president of the United States who's been impeached. For Weiner, it especially doesn't work, as Ben Smith of Politico pointed out in a really actually good article that sort of covered the waterfront this morning. He has Democratic rivals. He wants to be mayor of New York. He's obsessed with being mayor of New York. He might be mayor of New York if he'd run last time. And so it's not just the Republicans who are itching to use this against him. It's a whole bunch of Democrats who are just salivating. And when they play that on the local news, that's incredibly destructive to your local political career.
Looking bad.
So here's my bit of sympathy for the guy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll get to his best excuse, which I hope is the one he uses this afternoon. I'm on Twitter. I try to build up a big following. I follow a lot of people. Most of them are people I think will be interesting.
Yeah, you have genitalia. You have a camera.
No. That's the weird. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to my genitalia. If a really good-looking woman who seems interesting, follows me.
Totally.
Odds are I will follow her as opposed to the equally good-looking man who's following me.
Sure, but you're not married. You're not a married congressman.
I know, he's just following them.
Oh, come on.
Some of them look like they're 14, but he's following,
So, have you looked at the pictures of the various women? Now,
somebody did a pictorial, and it was horrifying.
He's got like tens of thousands of followers, but he only follows about 190 people.
They were about the age of your daughters.
Like what, dozens and dozens and dozens of them?
No, he's got 200, and I think he has 20 maybe who are like that.
Yeah. A little weird. Because he's got the option
after the first 10, you're so horrified that that it's tasteless to even include anymore. And some of them have said that he never contacted them this morning. So anyway, that's my defense of the guy. The great mystery, Ben Smith poses three possibilities. One is the obvious thing, which he's guilty. Two is he was hacked, which could be proved easily if he just opened up his computer and let some techies.
Well, but this gets. No, wait a second. I mean, one of the mysteries is. By the way, I hope everyone knows what this story is about, right? It's about this.
We're talking about Anthony Weiner having sent a picture.
Allegedly sent a link, tweeted a link to a 21-year-old in Seattle, which linked to a photo allegedly of the lower part of a man who was wearing underwear.
Right.
It wasn't X-rated.
There was no nudity. Right.
No nudity. But it seemed to be a man who was getting into a good mood.
Yes, although it was subtle.
It was subtle. He was just getting into a good mood.
But yes, that's what it was a photo of. And
he was getting into a good enough mood for his judgment to desert him, possibly.
Yes. Anyway, and so this guy is a congressman. The woman who was sent this is a journalism student in Washington State, who seems to be a very good writer, bizarrely. The initial left-wing theory was, that this photo was never posted, that the alleged screenshot of this link to this semi-lurid, lewd photo was faked by a right-wing blogger. But this was on Daily Kos. And then the key turn in the story was the Daily Kos put out a call saying, if you actually saw this, they responsibly said, if you saw this, let us know. And dozens of people said they saw it. So it wasn't fake. It really happened.
Yeah.
Which left him with the hack defense. Or the third possibility was it was accidentally tweeted. And we know that cell phones often do things like that. My cell phone...
No, but I don't think that's it. I think he meant to send... Well, I gather you can send direct messages in Twitter that only reach one recipient.
Right, but then he's guilty. Then he's guilty of sending a lewd photo to a comely co-ed. Then he's in trouble.
Totally. Well, wait, what's the scenario where he accidentally sent it but had nothing to do with the lewdness?
The scenario is he meant to sext his wife. That is the scenario.
Oh, yeah, I do that with my wife all the time, Mickey.
Bob, you're an older generation than this guy, and certainly an older generation than his wife.
I'm not that much older than him.
He's on the road a lot. We're crafting a defense for the guy.
Good luck with that.
He loves his wife. His wife is the famous Huma Abedin.
Yeah.
Who was Hillary's aide.
Yeah.
Who there were all sorts of, because she is the person who picks up Hillary's phone at 7 in the morning, because that's her job, to be Hillary's body person. There were all these sort of lurid rumors that they were having an affair, which...
She and Hillary,
which friends of mine who know her assure me is completely bogus.
I think we're getting into the kind of tangential part of this story at this point.
That's who it is. No, but so you'd want to, if you're...
No, you'd want to know whether
your wife's on the road, or you're on the road, it's a loving gesture, Bob. I'm not married, but isn't that what you folks do?
As I just said, only moments ago. In fact, I owe my wife one of those. Let me go get my iPhone. Here's the thing. Look, I don't know what he's going to say that could both explain, come up with an innocent explanation for this, and an explanation for his disastrous press performance yesterday, where he kept refusing to answer questions when he could have just said, I didn't do it.
Here's what I think he should say.
Yeah?
I was drunk.
Yeah,
What's wrong with I was drunk?
Okay, but remember, first of all, it's a pretty weird thing for a congressman it's really an uncomfortable position to be in if you're a congressman. He did this, A, and B, it means, if that's the case, it means that he already told one lie publicly, which was that he was hacked.
But people forget the lies when you...
And he would, and I guess he told that lie soon enough that you would say he was still drunk when he told the lie that he was hacked?
No, you'd say that my initial defensive reaction, and, he should strip himself bare like the cop at the end of L.A. Confidential.
Can we just quickly talk about what we think actually happened? The most plausible explanation is that he meant to send her a direct message, which is what? You would put a D before the @ sign with her handle?
Apparently, I've never done that.
Right.
But apparently
that would have worked. But if you don't put the D, then it goes to everyone and comes to her special attention.
Right.
And so in this scenario, but wait a second, he doesn't just do this out of the blue, right? In this scenario, they're like direct messaging back and forth, and he's saying, hey, send me something racy, and she does and says, you send me something racy.
Well, her regular, picture is racy enough.
Well, yeah, right, but there was presumably some kind of escalation. I mean, you'd have to be...
Well, we don't know.
Well, anyway.
The one question they've never asked is, had they DM'd each other in private? She says, I've never...
Well, she, deleted her whole Twitter account, right?
Yeah. But
she seems to be in the tank, assuming he did this, and coming up with this claim that she knows what person did this and it's not him.
The one thing that does seem to be true is that there were a bunch of right-wing bloggers who were sort of watching him because they suspected this about him, and she may have felt harassed by them.
Yeah.
But they were watching him because they had a suspicion, and then they caught him. That's what happens when you watch people.
Seems to be what happened.
You catch him. But why can't he say, or pills? Pills are better than alcohol. Why can't he say, I mixed these pills in the wrong combination, and they caused me to do crazy things? And, we've seen from the success of the movie The Hangover that people are much more tolerant of crazy things you do under the influence now.
One problem
than they were 20 years ago.
One problem...
He might be able to get away with that.
One possible problem with that is, and this is a cautionary tale for you, didn't he do this right after being on MSNBC?
I don't think so. I think he was hanging around waiting for Justice Clarence Thomas to release his conflict of interest disclosure late on a Friday night in a sort of Friday doc dump because he wanted to go and then denounce him.
I'll tell you what.
He's always on MSNBC. He's Anthony Weiner.
He's Anthony Weiner. And I suppose...
But go ahead, sorry. You're saying it's serotonin poisoning because
serotonin poisoning after MSNBC, and I'm warning you because you're about to go on MSNBC. We don't want to read about you in the papers tomorrow.
I won't go anywhere near my cell phone for 5 hours after I'm on MSNBC. The serotonin high of being on with Matt Miller talking. Gee, you think we'll talk about the budget?
Hey, good transition.
The serotonin high of talking about the budget is so great. Who knows what I'll do?
I don't know. I think you'll probably get some admiring glances from women on your way out of the studio.
I might run for Senate or something wacky like that.
Yeah, did you get that picture? Well, we can take this offline, but...
Don't start DMing me pictures. That'd be bad. Can
we link to that picture, Mickey? Do we have your permission to link to that picture?
Yes.
Okay.
Obscene as it is.
Obscene as it is. Let's just say it's Mickey related and Weiner related, okay? And leave it at that.
Well, now, since we transitioned to the budget, let's do the budget.
Okay, but first let's say if his press conference today sheds new light, really leads us to think maybe he's innocent, then maybe we'll tape a little thing and append it to this after the initial airing of this dialogue.
Maybe we'll do that, but yes. I'll have to get back from NBC Studios.
And we will signify that somehow.
Yeah.
So budget. Well, so the Republicans pulled this stunt, right?
Total stunt because they took elaborate pains to warn Wall Street that it was only a stunt.
And the New York Times headline seems a little wrong to me on this. The New York Times headline is what? House bars rise for debt ceiling. Well, it didn't really bar.
Yeah, they just voted not. They didn't vote to do it.
They just floated this legislation that would have raised the debt ceiling. They introduced it expressly for the purpose of voting against it.
Well, people like who write headlines like words like bars because they're short. And
because the headlines are short or the people are short?
The words are short.
Okay. Bar is good in that sense.
That's why everybody was rooting for...
Just has the unfortunate property of being the wrong word.
That's why everybody was rooting for Ron Unz, U-N-Z, to run for governor.
Yeah. No, I well remember my days of headline writing and the virtue of the word moles.
And instead we
Planning
elected Arnold
Board
Schwarzenegger.
Moles Project.
Happened.
What?
Instead of Ron Unz, we elected Arnold Schwarzenegger, and look what happened.
Look what happened there. I mean, we just got a choice of men behaving badly here. But first, some sexy stuff about the debt. So the Republicans pull this stunt. And tell me, is the idea here that they're just demonstrating to the Democrats that they're willing to vote against raising the debt ceiling, so don't call their bluff when it really comes down to the wire in August?
No, of course not. They're demonstrating that Democrats who've been calling for a clean debt ceiling raised bill are not willing to vote for a clean debt ceiling raised bill, and they're calling their bluff. And only 97 Democrats voted in favor of it, so they did call their bluff. So we're not going to have a clean debt ceiling bill. We're going to have some sort of deal.
Okay, but why can't the Democrats just say, well, that's because we don't want to raise the ceiling unless it's attached to a recension of the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy?
Well, they could say that if they were, but their whole point is that it's an obsolete form of blackmail, and they have a good point. Why should we have to have a separate vote to raise the debt ceiling? Why can't the debt ceiling just rise in line with whatever Congress appropriates? They voted for all these expenditures once. I think they have a good argument. It's a gratuitous roadblock that affords the opportunity for blackmail.
You know what I think the Democrats should do now? Is introduce not a law, just a resolution in Congress saying that if a package to reduce the debt and the deficit includes, or guess what, it reduces the deficit and decreases the rate of increase of the debt. Is that what would happen anyway? If a deficit-cutting package reduces benefits significantly for the poor and the middle class, then it must include rescinding the tax cuts for income earners over $250,000 that were passed during the Bush era as a resolution. And I would say dare the Republicans to vote against that. Let's go ahead and test this. Let's market test this whole issue.
No, the Republicans are perfectly happy to vote to keep the Bush tax cuts. That's their
I think you put it like this, though. You put it in that formulation, and it's not a good news story for them that they voted against it.
The Democrats have a killer winning issue in Medicare. They don't need anything else. And the Republicans, McConnell has stupidly
I'm not talking about what they need. I'm talking about what would be good in terms of reducing the deficit. A tax hike on rich people would reduce the deficit. That would be good.
I understand you're being wonky, but the Democrats don't do well when they pose as defenders of impoverished beneficiaries of government programs. They win when they pose as defenders of the trusted, popular Medicare program for seniors.
Fine, but
that's all they need to do.
But see, they can't seem totally indifferent to the deficit problem, I think.
No, they don't have to. This brings to my point. This is a point I've made several times, but now I have it sort of formalized because I've realized it's just like immigration reform, Bob. How is it like immigration reform, you ask?
It's a looming peril to the United States.
No, there are two things that have to happen for immigration reform. We have to have an enforcement regime that works, and we eventually will give some form of de facto amnesty to people who are here. Okay, but we don't have to do them at once. The sin of comprehensivism is everybody says, "Oh, it has to be in one package all at once." And that's exactly the recipe for disaster. In fact, the sequencing is all important. You have to do the enforcement first to win people's trust that the borders are secure, and then you can have an amnesty, okay?
Okay, so what is the analog here? What do you want to do first?
The analog is the budget. You don't have to do the cuts and the tax increases at the same time. Everybody knows eventually, just as we are going to have a de facto amnesty, we're going to have tax increases. But before you don't have to do the tax increases at the same time.
But why not do
them?
The spending? What's the argument against doing them now? I have an argument for doing them now. Do you have one against it?
And this is what's going to happen, sort of, with the debt ceiling package. If Obama said, right now, I'm Dr. Cut the budget. Yeah. I agree with Republicans. There's a lot of bloat in the budget. Government is inefficient. We need the government. We have to do these things, but we don't need the government to waste your money. So for the next year, I'm going to devote myself to finding the fat. Remember, he said he was going to go line by line through the budget. I'm going to go line by line through the budget. We're going to cut out the fat, and in fact, I'm going to give awards to my cabinet secretaries who succeed in cutting their budgets the most. I've directed OPM to give a bonus, and we're going to promote and publicize those politicians who cut the fat in their agencies.
So that's all he does, this vague
he
promise?
He will be wildly popular. the Democrats would be wildly popular.
It's obvious
They're not going to
bullshit.
cut that much fat.
It's obvious bullshit.
They will cut what fat there is, and
It's
then they're in position,
No.
a couple of years down the road, to raise the taxes
There's
to
no
make up the
way.
difference.
There's no way he seems serious about cutting the deficit if he has no specific proposal that would actually do it, but says, "Trust us, we're going to find something."
Well,
That's ridiculous.
No, he said before we turn to revenues, we want to wring out all the fat. That's the way people.
So you're
think.
saying what? You're saying don't touch Medicare, don't touch entitlements, don't touch anything.
I think he has to. If he's going to do that, he has to take Medicare and Social Security off the table. Yes, we're cutting the rest of the budget now,
Oh, Mickey.
including defense.
Well, defense I'm all for, and there was an article in the Washington Post about how the deficit issue is starting to figure into calculations about when to withdraw from Afghanistan, and I'm all for that. We could stand for massive defense spending cuts, if you ask me, because our defense spending is at least as likely to get us into trouble in general as it is to actually serve the national interest.
But let's talk. What's so terrible about my scenario, other than that the Democratic interest groups who defend these spending programs
it just
will
doesn't
squawk.
make him sound serious about cutting the deficit, because this is the oldest claim in the world.
Cutting
Waste,
government
fraud, and abuse. We're going to find the fat.
how
They
does
never
he-
do, Mickey.
Well, if he comes up with a number of $3 trillion in cuts, then he's found the fat, hasn't he?
No, he's just come up with a number
No. You would pass the bill making these cuts.
without knowing what the cuts are.
No, the whole effort would be to specify the cuts.
We couldn't do that by August.
He could do that by the congressional elections.
But they got it. But the idea
Until the
is,
election, he should be cutting. He should be cutting the budget. Then he
Now,
runs
I
on
think-
Medicare. He wins, and
I
then he can
think-
raise taxes.
I think when he raises the debt ceiling, he's got to show something that will be perceived as seriousness about cutting the deficit. And I would be happy for that to prominently include tax hikes for the rich, and I don't understand why you're against them. And the idea that it's easy to do them later is nuts. If we have a Republican president next time around, it's impossible to do it. Okay?
Yes, and this is a way to ensure that we don't have a Republican president.
Oh, it
next time
ensures
around.
it. It ensures it, Mickey. Give me a break. If your
Obama
political
said,
judgment,
if Obama said, "I'm a good Democrat, but I don't believe in a fat government. I believe in a lean government," you don't think that would make him fantastically popular?
I just tried to explain that I think your whole analysis is totally screwed up, Mickey. No,
But
I don't believe that.
Why again? I haven't.
Because it just sounds like transparent bullshit.
It's not bullshit if you actually cut the budget.
The idea that you can really significantly cut the budget without causing anybody any pain, and in a way that is
No, you
politically
cause pain.
feasible, and in a
You
way
cause
that is
the pain.
politically feasible, that doesn't antagonize a bunch of constituencies, I just think is nonsense. And I also think, and in a way that doesn't antagonize your progressive base.
Of course, that
I mean, give
antagonizes
them
the
something
progressive
for
base.
once. Give them tax hikes on the rich.
And he can say we need tax hikes, and he's on record as favoring getting rid of the Bush tax cuts for the rich. I mean, he's not going to abandon that. He's just not. It's all in the sequencing, Bob. He's not going to do it now.
Mickey, you are advising that he abandon it right now. What he should
Yes,
do.
that's in fact what's happening. You think this Biden task force is going to agree to tax hikes on the rich? No, it's not. So why not make a virtue of it if it's going to happen anyway?
If Obama, one thing about him is he does not know the first thing about bargaining.
Yeah.
The famous Thomas Schelling example in his The Strategy of Conflict book, where you're playing chicken, you're in a car. The smart move is rip your steering wheel out, throw it out the window in full view of the driver, and then he knows you can't swerve and he has to swerve. If Obama would stand up and say, I guarantee you that I'm going to insist on tax hikes for the rich as part of any deficit cutting package that accompanies the raising of the debt ceiling. I guarantee you that it's over my dead body that's not part of the package. Then they would take him seriously, because then he would have made a public commitment that is too politically expensive to renege on. But Obama never does that.
No,
Obama never does that because he's such a nice man.
Because he would renege, because he doesn't control the Congress, Bob. He doesn't have the leverage to get that deal. He's not going to get that deal.
No, he would say...
If he said he wasn't going to do it until he got that deal, The stock market would tank if it took it
Mickey,
seriously,
you don't
because it
have
means
to
there's
have
not going to
control
be a
of
debt
Congress.
ceiling raised.
Mickey, you can veto. A president can veto without having control of Congress. That's what he'd say. I'm
Right,
going to veto it. I
But the
guarantee
default
it.
position if he vetoes is that we default on our debts, Bob. So that's not a
But
very
Mickey,
encouraging
we
sign
wouldn't,
to
because
send
he
to Wall
would
Street.
have played the game of chicken successfully for once.
No, that's.
The guy is totally.
You obviously are not a Washington insider like I am, Bob. That is not going to happen.
Yeah, how did that senatorial campaign go, Mickey? How did the Washington smarts get employed there? Sorry,
It was a learning experience.
that's hitting below the belt.
I was drunk. I don't know. I'm calling a press conference this afternoon. It'll clear it all up.
Yeah. Well, Weiner's seat is going to be open soon, possibly.
I mean, Obama's strategy has always been to be the sort of punching bag and let people punch him, and then eventually...
Sounds like a great strategy. Be a punching bag.
Well, it's worked with health care, Bob.
That's
no president has ever achieved that, and I think he's going to get away with it. I think this health care reform is going to stick. I don't think it's going to be repealed.
Well, leave that aside.
Well, that's a pretty big aside, Bob. It's a huge achievement, and it's the product of his rope-a-dope bargaining style.
Well, he
with
gave a lot
Nancy
away on
Pelosi just
healthcare.
doing what she wanted.
And people think he could have gotten more. I don't know. I thought it was an accomplishment.
He got exactly what everybody knew he was going to get. He
Well,
wasn't going to get a
anyway,
public office.
our differences are clear. I think it's totally clear that if this president doesn't restore the tax cuts for the rich, they may never get restored because we may have a Republican president next time. And God, those rates are low by American historical standards, low by international standards. It's just ridiculous.
Of course,
It's just ridiculous to not ask rich people to do a damn
Well, you
thing
could have a tax reform.
at a time of national crisis.
You could have a tax reform that didn't raise
that
rates.
a supposedly progressive president doesn't have the nerve to just throw down the whatever the metaphor is.
Speaking of healthcare reform, we could have had a system that allowed people to buy into Medicare, which would be like a public option. Lower the age to 55 from 65.
Yeah.
And it actually got a sufficient supermajority in the Senate. But then a certain obnoxious congressman endorsed it and scared away Joe Lieberman. You know who that obnoxious congressman was?
The one who may soon be an obnoxious former congressman?
Well, it was Anthony Weiner.
Yeah.
And Lieberman said, damn, if Weiner's for this, it must be bad. And he's flipped his vote. So...
Speaking of which, just to quickly revisit, and maybe we could translate to our next man behaving transition to our next man behaving badly with this if you're about done with the debt.
We have two more topics: men behaving badly in Israel.
Okay, transition to that.
I can do a transition to either one.
Just quickly, by way of moving to DSK, if Weiner did this and admits it, do you think he's toast? Do you think he has to resign?
No, I think he can get away with it.
God, what does this country come to?
The country has come to that, Bob. Everybody sexts everybody. Get with it. It was just an affectionate greeting. I like your picture. That's all it said.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like he's Zach Galifianakis in The Hangover. You don't think Zach would get elected to Congress?
Haven't seen the movie, but I'm thinking maybe he wouldn't.
So I think Barney Frank had an affair with a male prostitute.
Well, first of all, that was not violating any marital vow. It wasn't.
The guy was turning tricks.
Speaking of which, that's
the
what
guy was turning tricks while Frank was having an affair with him, and Frank knew it and admitted it, and he still got away with it. Turning tricks is a violation of the law, Bob.
Maybe he was drunk.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, anyway, DSK, what's our excuse for dredging him up? Our excuse is we haven't dialogued since that story broke.
Right, well,
This is Dominique Strauss-Kahn, of course, accused of rape.
Right, and the interesting thing to me is, does this show that America is a socially egalitarian country in sharp distinction with France? Which
Relative to France, I think it does.
Supposedly this wonderful socialist, social democracy, but yet apparently, a guy like Dominique Strauss-Kahn gets away with things routinely, or people like him get away with things routinely in France that you wouldn't get away with here, because if you're a hotel chambermaid in the United States and you go to the police, they actually take you seriously. But I've had a correspondence with a friend of mine in Paris who says, well, it's also sexism. It's that the French just don't take rape seriously. If you're a woman and you go to the police in France, their first question will be, oh, well, you were dressed provocatively. What do you think is supposed to happen?
Well, that's the way the United States probably used to be on that particular issue.
Well, it could be, but rape is just not such a big deal, so you add that with the fact that if you're lower ranked, you'll never get a hearing, and the chambermaid is in trouble. But
yeah, although interestingly, the woman who accused him of attempted rape in France, very credibly and well before this happened, and it's on the record, who's a journalist in France, she was not nobody,
Right.
She was herself a woman of great accomplishment.
Well, that reinforces the idea that maybe it's not classism, maybe it's sexism.
It's as much sexism.
And we had Bernard-Henri Lévy, part of the conspiracy of adulterers, trashing this woman as a phony.
Yeah. Although I thought that ridiculous thing he wrote that appeared in the Daily Beast did highlight this contrast in terms of social equality. He, without apology, totally conflated the question of is this guy guilty with how important and accomplished is this guy. He just seamlessly transitioned from one to the other as if they were, intricately related. In America, you would never do. I can't remember or imagine a comparable analysis in America.
Well, I guess Clinton would be it, and I would think you're right. Even at the height of Monica Gate, nobody said Clinton's so important, therefore he's innocent.
Well,
they said,
you had a few of those. They didn't say, therefore he was innocent, right. But they did kind of apologize in that vein. There was the woman, who said she would perform oral sex in gratitude of all he had done
Nina Burley.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a difference there.
I felt proud as an American to read that thing he wrote and think, you would never see an intellectual write something like this in America.
But here's the interesting question. After reading your book, The Moral Animal, I came to the conclusion that the French were basically had it right on matters of sexuality. At least that's one of the implications one can take from your book. They allow men as they get old to have mistresses, and it's sort of tolerated. They're various social mechanisms for coping, and they have a sort of semi-polygamous arrangement, and they understand that men want to have affairs and that there's no symmetry there. And one of the implications of that is that rape isn't such a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a crime. People should go to jail for it. But it used to be a capital offense in the United States, and that's because of sexist attitudes about the flower of womanhood and putting women on a pedestal. Once we got rid of those, it stopped being a capital offense, but it's still become this very, very serious major crime, and the French maybe have a point that it shouldn't be that serious a crime. It's a crime. It's a horrible crime. It's a violation of integrity.
What, the rape shouldn't be?
Yeah, then maybe we should dial it back a little bit.
I think maybe you should dial back that last few sentences a little bit before you catch a ton of shit.
Well, the original rapist should die was based on sexist attitudes of the purity of women and the sort of Madonna half of the Madonna horror complex.
Wait, the original, start that sentence again, I missed the first part. The original...
People used to be executed for rape. It was a capital offense, okay?
Okay.
We wouldn't do that now.
No.
So we've already dialed rape back a little bit. And dialing it back, we realized that the making it a huge capital offense was the product of sexist attitudes about the purity of women and blah, 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 blah.
Well, actually,
so those went by the boards.
What that probably was a classist thing. What was happening was poor men who had no women were raping them, and rich men were feeling threatened because they wanted the women, and so they had the poor men put to death.
Well, and there was probably race involved too. All that stuff.
Right. It was all of that. That was probably partly a class thing.
So,
I don't think that was so much about sexism as about class.
Right. But
and in general, the extent to which there are intra-gender conflicts on this issue are underappreciated. Not just rape, but I mean philandering. You know, I mean, when upper-class men have de facto polygamy, you know, if you do the math, it means that somewhere at the lower end of the social spectrum, there are men who are having more trouble finding women than they would otherwise. So it isn't just some women who are victimized. It's you know, and in fact, some women in certain polygamous arrangements, you might argue, actually benefit some.
But the men never organize into an interest group, Bob.
Not on this issue, no. But this is.
All I'm saying is, it seems to me, I vaguely remember in the 60s and 70s that, you know, with the first flowering of you know, whatever it is, the revolution or whatever, that rape became much less of a deal. It was ridiculous to execute Carol Chessman for rape in California, blah, 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 blah. And then it became a subject of feminist outrage that people were sort of downplaying it. And I just think that gets overplayed. That's all. I think I think he should go to prison, okay? But I
think
just
he
think
should
it's
go
overdone.
to prison. I mean, I doubt that the story is quite as clear-cut as the story that's been told. I mean, in terms of what really happened, I'm kind of skeptical of this. He jumped out of the bathroom and grabbed her. Because judging by the French victim's testimony, that's not his M.O. His M.O. is to kind of come on slowly and inexorably, but when resistance sets in, whether because he convinces himself that the resistance isn't heartfelt, or because he just considers himself a rapist, he doesn't stop there. And I really suspect that that's what happened, and that this woman initially felt that maybe she had done something wrong in not resisting earlier or something. I mean, this story that's being told just sounds to me oversimplified. I suspect he closed the door, and, you know, you've got to remember how powerless a woman like this feels. You know, she can lose her job if a single customer complains about her, and especially a customer who's in a $3,000 a night suite, right? So if he closes the door and says, "Come here," she's probably going to come there, you know. And then later she's thinking, "Oh, was that a mistake? I shouldn't admit I did that," you know.
Well, right. We'll find out.
We'll find out, but it's going to be a problem probably in the prosecution.
Right. Here's another question I have after. Maybe I should stop now, but
yeah, stop while you're behind, Mickey.
After reading your book, it seemed to me that rape was a function of low serotonin. In other words, if rape is a way of evolution telling a man, "You're such a loser, the only way you're going to get your genes into the next generation is by raping somebody," and so if men are really low on serotonin, they have these evil impulses. Dominique Strauss-Kahn can't possibly have been low on serotonin. He was head of the IMF, and
I don't think that was his problem. No, but let me clarify first of all. I mean, low serotonin is correlated, I think, with impulsive crimes in general. It's a signifier of, it accompanies low social status. As your social status drops and you get dissed a lot, your serotonin drops. And one argument is that in general, people have less to lose if they're at the bottom of the hierarchy and are more inclined to break the law in general, and steal stuff. Now, separately from that is a theory, it's only a theory, that rape is, quote, an adaptation, not in the sense that all men are designed by natural selection to be rapists, but that, yes, if you're denied access to mates, you are more inclined, more drawn to the idea of being a rapist in the kind of classic, jump out of the dark corner sense, right? Not the date rape sense.
Right.
And so this is, I think, gets to your question, how could a guy with such high serotonin be a rapist? In a way, this is why I'm skeptical of the simplified version of the story. I think he was not a jump out of the dark corner rapist. He was a slow and inexorable escalation rapist, and maybe he doesn't think of himself as a rapist. His serotonin is so high, some men convince themselves that all women want it from them,
Well, but that's what you convince yourself of when you're low on serotonin too.
Not when you're an actual rapist. No,
you're saying there's a. Why wouldn't there be like a circle where, if you have high serotonin or low serotonin, you wind up at the same place?
I'm not sure I see what you mean, but these are different styles. I mean, his French accuser said, first of all, she wanted an interview with him. So he says, "We'll show up here," and it's this apartment that, is not his apartment.
Right.
He's the only one there. And he says, "If you're going to ask me questions, I have to just hold your hand while you do it." And she's like, "Okay." And then he's moving his hands up her arm. Then he's got her arms, and eventually she literally has to fight him off. That's his MO. And I'll bet more than once he has been able to convince himself, and maybe in some cases it was true, that in the end the woman consented. But I think that's the high serotonin MO, as opposed to the I have to forcibly subdue this woman from the beginning.
Okay, well that's a good point. But so if you're a high serotonin male, you're not that inclined to violence.
Right.
Yeah, that's. In the movies, when a high serotonin man rapes a woman, he always resorts to violence, but that's a gratuitous Hollywood touch.
Yeah, although the French woman said she had to literally kick and fight him off as he was tearing garments off in the end.
The question is, did he use the John Kerry line? Which
is, "Do you know who I am?"
Yes.
He allegedly used that with the chambermaid.
Yeah, that was Instapundit's joke that I felt awful that I
didn't know Kerry had said that. Yeah, I know McCain. Actually, this is a largely unreported story that McCain did this once, but I forgot that Kerry had used that line.
He supposedly uses it in the grocery store on Beacon Hill when he butts in line.
Oh, do you know who I am?
That's the rumor. I don't know if it's true.
Wouldn't put it past him.
Okay, so we only have one more topic to go.
Enough scandal. By the way, but just quickly, the other thing you said, doesn't France have kind of the right system of just permitting men to philander? I mean, no. It doesn't follow from evolutionary psychology. I mean, evolutionary psychology doesn't say anything about how society should handle inclinations of various kinds, including those that may be socially disruptive. You can constrain behavioral inclinations to whatever extent you want through moral and legal sanction, and Anglo-Saxon cultures traditionally have worked on that a little harder than French culture, than France, but that may be breaking down. But anyway, I'd say no. It's not like evolutionary psychology tells you which approach is.
No, but the French sort of have an avenue for these male impulses, and the American system at the moment seems to be stuff it. Don't express them. And at one point Bob, I think at one point you said the French have it all figured out.
No.
You deny ever saying that?
No, I think in my book, The Moral Animal, I said that whatever you think of Victorian morality, it was a society that did something that, according to evolutionary psychology, is very difficult. And it's the following. Reconcile great social, kind of income inequality and social stratification, reconcile that with robust monogamy, at least in the sense of a low divorce rate. For reasons I don't have time to get into, that's a tremendous challenge. I mean, societies and this is an argument for income equality, by the way. This is a conservative argument for income equality, for redistributing income, is that when there's more income equality, monogamy is easier to sustain.
Why is that?
Well, because you don't have these rich guys who are, by virtue of being so much richer than everyone else, are A, more attractive, and B, can afford multiple mistresses or wives, or and afford to pay divorce settlements and stuff.
But so isn't France sort of a counterexample? Don't we have greater income inequality than France? And yet, in France, people like DSK run around seducing people, and in the United States, it's a little more difficult. Can't even tweet somebody here.
Well, yeah, I mean, because we have this uptight, somewhat Victorian morality that also did the job back in Victorian days. It's not doing the job very effectively now, and it seems to be breaking down.
Yeah, okay.
But that's the way, historically, that paradox has been resolved. Massive social sanction, punishment, not legal punishment, but for people who get divorced, attaching stigma to divorce.
Yeah. Still worse if you're a member of Congress, sort of. But yes, I understand your point.
Yeah, it's still more costly in a way.
I understand your point. That's a good point. I'll think about it.
Think about it. So now on to what?
Israel.
Okay.
Here, my line is, Obama's the second half of the first half of Obama's first term has devolved. Second half of Obama's first term has devolved into pursuing doomed initiatives that everybody knows are going nowhere, sort of zombie initiatives like immigration reform or Middle East peace, and the entire effort is positioning yourself so you look good.
Well, I don't think it's worked out that well for him in Israel if that's what he's trying to do.
Expand.
Well, I didn't think he came out of this Bibi visit looking like the winner, did you?
I didn't either, but yet, a whole bunch of people like Andrew Sullivan and Jeffrey Goldberg and Fareed Zakaria rallied around him and said there was nothing that bad about calling for peace based on the 67 borders, and I don't think people pay that much attention to it.
No, I think they didn't. I mean, this is the whole problem with Israel is that, in general, in a lot of policies are, the positions are determined by a small but intensely motivated group. And in this case, that's like AIPAC and allied groups. And most people, although if you really sat down and talked to them about it, they'd be more reasonable than AIPAC and take a different view. They just don't care that much.
There was an article in Commentary that made a pretty good argument, I thought, that what Obama said really was a move in the Palestinian direction. Do you deny that?
Well, it wasn't a very substantial departure from what had been said and or assumed by various administrations.
Assumed maybe, but
even Bush said something very much like it once. Now, yeah, I mean, look, in a way, the 67 borders thing got disproportionate attention. The area where he was more consequentially rolling back a Bush position, I thought, was in saying that the right of return should be a negotiated matter. We shouldn't bias that in advance. Whereas Bush, as I recall, had said no right of return for Palestinians, which I think is a dumb thing, even though a full and untrammeled right of return is not feasible. But I still think that in the end that needs to be a negotiated thing where constraints get imposed on it, but in a way that preserves the dignity of the Palestinians.
So you agree that it was sort of a move in the Palestinian direction, and don't you support that? Don't you think Obama should have?
I support that part of what he said, and I agree that the basis, the part that Netanyahu systematically distorted in an act of just massive disrespect for an American president was when Obama said 1967 borders plus agreed upon swaps. Bibi kept talking like he said, we have to return to 67 borders, which was just a lie.
No, but the Commentary article, which is written by someone named Rick Richman, points out that before, here's the paragraph that had been a statement back in November. The Secretary reiterated that the United States believes that through good faith negotiations, the parties can mutually agree on an outcome which ends the conflicts and reconciles the Palestinian goal of an independent and viable state based on 1967 lines with agreed swaps, and the Israeli goal of a Jewish state with secure and recognized borders that reflects subsequent developments and meets Israeli security requirements. So the 67 lines was the Palestinian position. He was going to reconcile it with the Israeli position, and instead what Obama did was say it's going to be based on the Palestinian position. So it was a change.
First of all, 67 borders with swaps is not the Palestinian position. The Palestinian position is 67 borders, period. In other words, the ones recognized by international law. That's the starting Palestinian, because 67 borders with agreed upon swaps is what they'll wind up doing if anything happens, and I think nothing is. I think two-state is dead just about. But you shouldn't act like he was articulating exactly the Palestinian position.
But don't you? There's sort of two positions on his stand. One is it wasn't really. It was just stating something that was said before. Everybody knew it was going to be 67 borders with swaps. What's the big deal? It wasn't a diss of Netanyahu. Or the second position is, it was a diss of Netanyahu, and damn it, he should have dissed Netanyahu because Netanyahu was an obstacle to peace. Isn't the second position your position?
Oh, I think he should have challenged Netanyahu more forthrightly. I think after Netanyahu came over and showed such disrespect for him, I think he should go to Israel and lay down the law. See, I think at this point, I mean, the people who don't trust him on this issue just don't trust him and are never going to trust him. And I think he should quit worrying about AIPAC. Like 70% of AIPAC is never going to like the guy. And I think he should step up and get truly bold. I would like to see him. I think there would be much less political damage than he thinks if he said, explained why, if Israel does not stop all settlement construction, he will not vote against the Palestinian resolution in September. In September, Palestinians are going to appeal to the General Assembly for recognition of a Palestinian state along 67 borders.
Why?
I just think he should give a big speech explaining that Netanyahu is just leading Israel down the path to suicide. This is why even these ardently pro-Israel people like Goldberg were not happy with what Netanyahu did. I mean, that's the evidence right there. When you look at the number of people who are not on his side, who are basically right-wing, ardently pro-Israel, Obama should seize the moment and say they're right. This is the reason they're taking this position, because Netanyahu is not serving Israel's interests. By the way, he's also not serving America's interests.
Well, explain again how he's not serving Israel's interests and leading Israel.
Well, at the most minimal level, Mickey, if indeed, I mean, I actually think the Palestinian resolution in the end might be in Israel's interest. But the consensus in Israel is that the September resolution is this horrible thing to be avoided at all costs. Well, if he really, and if it can't be avoided, you want it to pass with as little support as possible. So Israel's goal is to peel away European support for it.
Right.
Well, Netanyahu's whole visit amounted to almost a campaign to ensure that you're not going to be able to peel away any European support, because he seemed so strident and unreasonable. So even in that minimal sense, if you define Israel's interests as avoiding, as minimizing the impact of that resolution, he did not serve Israel's interests.
And how did he horribly diss the United States, or at least the president?
He systematically lied about what Obama said and misrepresented it. So much so that Obama alluded to that before AIPAC without mentioning his name. Obama said this has been misrepresented several times. Everyone knew he was talking about Netanyahu. Okay, and then and the whole Congress thing where he comes before Congress, and Congress is complicit in this, of course, where you have this kind of sickening spectacle of him saying things like, we are entitled to all of the occupied territory, Judea and Samaria, because basically it says so in the Bible, even though the law says otherwise, and they give him a standing ovation. I mean, all of that amounted to a humiliation of Obama, a repudiation of Obama. He has this tense visit with Obama where, they're glaring at each other. He misrepresents Obama's position, and then he comes and, in effect, polishes off the dissing of Obama by getting all these congressmen to suck up to him and give him standing ovations, not because they give a damn about Israel, but because they're scared of AIPAC.
Okay, and I just wanted you to, not that I don't think I know what you're going to say, but how is Netanyahu leading Israel down the path of destruction? I assume it's because of the demographic time bomb you're talking about.
Yeah, but that has new force, because the Palestinians have been infected by the spirit of the Arab Spring, and there are now signs that they are actually going to do, and this includes Palestinians beyond the borders, can actually do what people have been talking about for a long time, is to actually do nonviolent resistance, and therefore amass massive quantities of international support. And some people think you may see a replay of South Africa, and at that point, Israel is going to be in a much weaker bargaining position, and you can imagine them desperately trying to salvage a two-state solution, offering better terms than they've ever offered, which actually I think isn't setting the bar all that high, but and maybe having to settle actually for a one-state solution and losing their identity as a Jewish state. So, look, that might not be horrible for everyone. It might work out. But if you're defining Israel as a Jewish state, it could be the end of the state.
That's interesting. I'm glad I asked. If Obama does what you want him to do and says, unless you stop the settlements, I'm going to vote for this Palestinian state
that
resolution.
may be ill thought out and not wise politically. That's partly just my
why isn't the obvious outcome is Netanyahu will say, okay, vote for it. They're not going to stop the settlements, so Netanyahu will say, okay, and he'll eat the resolution, and
but there are some people who think that could bring down the Netanyahu government because there's so much fear of this resolution. And if the U.S. doesn't vote against it, it's going to be overwhelming, And if the U.S. doesn't vote against it and makes no effort to peel off European support for it, it's just going to be, a devastating blow from the point of view of Israelis who fear it. And there are people who think that if Obama did that, he could actually bring down the government and bring a more moderate government to the fore.
Why isn't it a devastating blow to the UN? Because they're not going to have the balls to enforce it the way they enforce things on Libya.
No, but the thing is, it could legitimize all kinds of sanctions and stuff against Israel that the Palestinians would then start trying to amass.
I mean, to be like a South Africa situation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The legal logistics of that whole thing are complicated, and we don't have time to get into them.
This is how I survived in the New Republic, by studying ignorance on matters
seeking
of the
my
Middle
sage
East.
Guidance.
Not by advice, not by following your guidance, but by not knowing anything about the Middle East.
I didn't know much back then either, but Marty Peretz sent me to Israel. That's where my education began. He personally financed my trip and arranged my itinerary.
It hasn't really paid off for him, has it?
He failed to control my itinerary adequately. But let me work in a couple of things.
Okay.
Quickly, I just want to get you riled, maybe.
Okay, we got to be quick.
I know, okay. You have this blog post. You know how you get it starts. You know how the PS starts. You know how you get most histrionically angry at a critic or friend or spouse when you have a gnawing, barely conscious suspicion that they're at least partially right. That made me think of the last time you said that to me on Blogging Heads, which was when I very heatedly denied that the Iraq War had contributed to the Arab Spring. You remember that? And I said, au contraire, it's, to me, Iraqi, this democracy in which people get bombed and killed every week seems to me like almost the opposite of a role model. Well, since then, I've come across various evidence that actually that offhanded remark is right. Anthony Shadid, I'll link to this, in a video in the New York Times talking about Syria, says there's an upper middle class who fear the example of what they've seen in Iraq across the border, and they also fear what might follow the collapse of this government. That fear is one of the main sources of support that this government is able to draw on. Another, another Syria-related thing that I could also link to is Matt Duss saying on Blogging Heads, recounting a Sunni saying to a Shiite in Syria that his daughter, who's one of these secular liberals and is being oppressed by these like Shiite cops, he says, "You better be thankful for my daughter." In other words, secular liberals who are part of this revolt. Because if it's not for people like her, we Sunnis are going to do to you what you Shiites did to us in Iraq. Now that suggests that what happened in Iraq intensified sectarian explosiveness across the region, which is now standing in the way of reform in a lot of countries. Okay, there's also a link suggesting that this is happening in a dialogue between Madawi al-Rashid and Bernard Heikel about the same thing in Saudi Arabia, where Iraq is being used as an example by the ruling class of why they shouldn't democratize. I rest my case, man.
What country was the middle example? Egypt?
Well, the middle example, the first two happened in Syria, but the second example was distinct because what it suggested was that actually the sectarian conflict in Iraq had made sectarian tensions higher across the region, and those tensions are sabotaging progress in a number of countries.
Those things could all be true, and yet it could still be true that in terms of the people in the street who are terrifying the upper middle classes in Syria, as you say, Iraq is an inspiration. It just seems implausible to me that it's not. And it also, I have full confidence that people in the American media would not publicize it if it was.
Publicize what?
The fact that Iraq is a model. And there actually
Wait,
was...
they would not publicize the fact? Who publicized the fact here?
There have been some...
I haven't heard anything other than the kind of...
There have been people who have referred to Iraq as a model for Arab Spring
Well, in other words, there have been people who did what you're doing, which is conjecturing it without any actual evidence.
No, these are people on the ground. If you, I didn't come hard because I didn't know you were going to make this.
Send me some links, buddy.
Okay, I'll send some links.
Final bit of housekeeping, okay? Final, very short. Don't worry, because I know you got to run on be on MSNBC and get serotonin poisoning and
this
send some photos.
This is a paying gig, man. No, wait, it's not a paying gig.
Just quickly, well, first of all, okay, we've got this area. The site is in flux. We did a redesign we redesigned some elements that are themselves going to get redesigned. If you look at either the video page or the home page, you see on the lower right, there's this area where viewers can submit clips. We still encourage them to do that. And by the way, we will make as the first link, in links mentioned, the link to the video explaining how you create dinglinks for those of you who may not know. We are actually going to change that area a little, the directive there. It's going to be explicitly, it's going to be called amplifier, and that word will show up before long. And it's going to, what we want you to do is if you're out there watching stuff and somebody, a blogging head, says something you agree with and you think is an interesting way to put it, or a dramatic way to put it, an effective way to put it, or an underappreciated way to put it, or something, that is your chance to help get the message out, okay? Whether you're on the right or the left, that is your way to harness, to amplify messages on blogging heads. And we will still offer fabulous prizes for those whose nominees are most clicked on, but more details on that and how that's going to change.
So this is a positive thing. You can't. What if you think somebody's made a complete humiliating fool of themselves, like I may have done in this very dialogue, and you want to highlight the absolute Anthony Weiner-esque moment of humiliation?
That's an interesting question. I mean, if I thought there were going to be enough of those. I mean, the problem has been that the guidance is so vague. Well, there's a number of problems. But I think, we could have two sections, amplifier and mufflers.
But you're not muffling. You're
No,
amplifying.
you're not muffling.
Humiliator.
Well, I guess...
Humiliator is good.
Humiliator is good. Amplifier and humiliator. I'm not sure we want to say, hey, come appear on Blogging Heads where we will encourage people to humiliate you.
You're a positive guy anyway.
I mean, you could define, we will take all this under consideration and make subsequent announcements and decide whether humiliation is a form of amplification. But, meanwhile, I just want to say, think of it that way. Okay. So, Mickey, go on to a bigger and better venue. Go ahead. I'm not hurt.
Okay. I feel like I'm going to the major leagues now.
You are.
Even though you turned them down. Let the record show.
I swear I did turn down that very show, man. Sorry, I hate to break that to you.
Man, I'm your backup. I'm your standby.
I should have said, I'm not available, but no doubt Mickey is.
Yeah. I'll tell them, and that'll be the first thing. I'm just filling in here for Bob Wright. I know you wanted him.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. See you around.
See you later.